Hello and welcome to tonight's webinar. My name is Lizzie Induni and I'm the chairperson for SANHS. Tonight, Tony Hardy will be talking about photographing old buildings and indoor situations. Tony will share some tips and tricks which he gained from his experience photographing buildings for various SANHS-related and other projects. Tony is normally part of the webinar team, so we'll see how well we do without him tonight. Tony spent his career as an engineer and project manager in the energy industry. He worked on everything from power networks, IT systems, telecoms, business improvements. And it was while integrating an IT system into a 12th century former priory that he became interested in old buildings. This coincided with the revival of his interest in digital photography, having been a film enthusiast for many years. After finishing full-time employment, he got involved in a number of voluntary projects, one of which was the SANHS research project on Dunster's early buildings. As usual, Tony will take questions at the end of the talk. To ask questions, you'll need to activate the chat button at the bottom of the page and type in a question. To find the button, just run the mouse over the bottom of your screen and a series of buttons should pop up. Because we're recording this lecture, we won't use names in the question time. It's free to register for the talks, but a donation of £5 towards the ongoing cost of SANHS would be greatly appreciated. The donations button is on the SANHS website donations page for webinars. To make things easier, a link to the donations page will also be posted on the chat button at the end of the lecture. Okay, over to you.
Okay, thanks, and thanks, Lizzie, and good evening, everybody. There's odd bit of time in this because I did a webinar, some of you may have saw back in November last year about photographing outdoors, and here we are in May talking about indoor stuff. But it's a little bit chilly outside, so we're best to stay indoors, I think. But I'll just get the screen share going, and we'll get underway. There we go. Hope you can all see that. So, bit of context to start with. This is going to be about photographing buildings indoors, and it's probably more so than the stuff I did on outdoor stuff. It's more specific to the sort of thing that we do as groups of volunteers, enthusiasts, recording and investigating and interpreting old buildings and looking at working with relatively low cost, sort of what you might call consumer entry level equipment. And you'll see as we go through creative use of a few everyday household items as well. The rough sort of order I'm going to do this in, and examples are not going to be just from one building, we're going to be darting around between buildings, but I'm going to try roughly to sort of start on the ground floor and work our way upwards, and probably in about 40 minutes from now we'll find ourselves in the dark and dusty world that is the roof space. So I'm going to be talking mainly about digital photography, but I thought it'd be good just to start with what do we mean by a digital camera? And it can be a number of things. Could be a dedicated digital camera like this. I say it doesn't need to be anything sort of high-end consumer level sort of stuff is fine. We've also got smartphones, and I probably, if I'd been doing this talk 5 years ago, I wouldn't even have mentioned smartphones, but they've come a very long way in a short space of time, and they've got very capable cameras on them now. Won't do everything that we might want to do in this context, but they'll do a lot of it, and I'll point out some of the capabilities and limitations as we go. And there's also, and they're almost an endangered species, in the middle here you've got sort of compact point and shoot cameras that used to be very popular. They've been squeezed out somewhat. They've almost been squeezed out of that sort of point and shoot market by smartphones, because the smartphone would do all of that stuff. But there are some still in the market in production, they've tended more towards the sort of dedicated digital camera, and they're sort of some of the ones now are quite capable and give you the the sort of degree of control that a digital camera would give. I'm not going to cover, and I'd love to have time to do this, but I just think within the time it won't fit. I'm not going to talk about all that technical stuff of apertures and shutter speeds and all of that. I guess some people are probably familiar with that, and for anybody that's not, I'll post some reference links to reference material at the end, some very good references where you can read about that stuff, probably explained in a far better way than I can explain it. So let's get underway with this sort of virtual building survey then. What I do generally if I'm going into a building is start off with some general views, and they don't need to be particularly well considered or technically high quality shots. They're just views around the sort of four walls of the room, just as an aid memoir really for people that are making sketches or starting to draw up plans of the general layout of the room. And also a bit of an aid memoir for me as a photographer. I'm probably to get to some of the features, and we'll talk about sort of features in a minute, but to get some of the things I really want to get some detailed photographs of, I'm possibly going to need to move some ornaments or items of small furniture. I'm not going to turn the place upside down. People very kindly and generously let us into their homes to do this study and recording. And if I move anything, I want to make sure I put it back exactly where it came from. So if I've got a sort of shot of where it was to start with, then I can do that. I'm not actually going to show any of in the interest of privacy. I'm not going to show any of these general views because I didn't want in a public discourse like this to really show the sort of interior of people's homes and their sort of personal effects. But just imagine those sort of sort of shots that we'll start with. But I'm more interested really in specific features and the sort of features that are going to inform us about and help our understanding and interpretation of that building and the way it's developed. And this is by no means an exhaustive list, but the sort of features we might be looking at. Doors and door furniture, door ironmongery. You've got a door there with a very nice iron hinge on it. Windows, and again, window fixing, sort of like iron strap, iron stay there. Wood paneling, a lot of the places that I've been involved with sort of started life as medieval cross passage houses, and you often come across these the remains or sometimes completely intact wood panels that form the cross passage. So they're obviously an item of interest. Fireplaces again can tell us a lot about the development of a building. And the lintels, beams, brissamers, some people call them above fireplaces, and little things like these burn marks. They are burn marks that people have put there over the centuries, made them with a wax taper, and nobody knows exactly why, but the general consensus is that they were a sort of ritual protection thing to try and discourage evil spirits from coming down the chimney. Whether they worked or not, who's to say? And then beams, particularly these lovely big timber beams you get on, particularly on ground floor ceilings. A lot of these places would have started off as open halls, sort of open from the floor right up to the top of the roof. And a first floor might have been inserted maybe a couple of 100 years later, and that's how these lovely heavy beams come about. We're interested in those and chamfers on the beams, and particularly the way those chamfers, so-called chamfer stops that we get as the at the end of the beam where it enters the wall, and there's some various ways of stopping that chamfer, all of again which can help us with our interpretation of the building. And ceilings, and I've got sort of become quite a fan of ceilings of late. Here's a lovely timber frame ceiling, probably sort of you know 15th to 16th century. And I started with this because it sort of illustrates the main challenge we've got in photographing indoors. We're usually doing it in daylight, pretty much always doing it in daylight because, as I say, people generously let us into their homes. They probably don't want us hanging around there after dark. Um, and what we very often find is you've got your only source of light really is daylight entering through a window, and in a lot of cases it's just a single window on one wall, and you get the effect that we can see here that you've got very strong light there near the window, getting progressively darker as we go into the room. So we really want to even up the lighting there on that ceiling and see if we can get some even lighting across the whole thing. And you may have spotted there on the back wall, there's a wall light, so we could try turning that one on. And there's another one off to the left there. So let's have a go at turning those lights on, see if we can throw some light into the back of the room. Well, not so good. We get this sort of orangey cast, and I'm sure some of you will have experienced the same sort of thing when you've taken photographs back in the days of film. You've taken some photographs indoors in a room lit by tungsten bulbs, and you're using daylight film, and when you get your pictures back, they've got this orangey cast, and that's what we got here. Now, cameras it gives the camera a bit of a problem. Cameras have got a good way of dealing with different types of light source, so-called different color temperatures of light. There's this thing, this control, and all cameras and smartphones have got this thing called white balance, and you can adjust for various types of lighting. So we've got sort of daylight, shady daylight, cloud, sort of incandescent lights, sort of tungsten and warm white, probably like the things that we've probably got warm white LEDs there. There's even an underwater one. I've never actually used that on a building survey yet, but I guess there's always a first time. But that white balance is very good, and you normally just leave it on auto and it will take care of any situation. But what it can't cope with is two types of lighting in the same scene, two light of different color temperatures in the same scene. And if we try to balance for one, so here the camera's trying to balance for the daylight, so we've got some nice, reasonably good whites up there where the daylight is predominating, but we've got this sort of orangey cast over the rest of it. We could try asking the camera to balance for this warm white light from the artificial light. If we do that, then we've got some nice whites at the back, but everything else has gone this sort of eerie bluey purple. So wall lights won't do really. The camera can't balance two types of light in the same scene. So I'm sure anybody that's been on a survey with me will identify with this. I must be a really annoying guy to be on a survey with, because you've got people there trying to take measurements and make sketches of things, and I'm coming around turning all the lights off. But apologies if you've fallen victim to that, but hopefully you can now understand a little bit of why. So if we're going to introduce some light to even up the lighting on the ceiling, given that the camera can only handle light of similar types at the same time, we're going to need to introduce some light that's much closer in its characteristics to daylight. And there's two types of light generally that I use. One is flash lighting, also called strobe or speed light sometimes, but I tend to call it flash. It's a sort of flash gun unit that you can either fit on top of your camera or use separately. Good things about them, they're nice and light, compact and maneuverable. You can get them into funny little spaces. The big advantage, they're really versatile. You can get some really subtle effects. You can control the output power from full power, which is very bright indeed. It's a very intense flash. maybe a few milliseconds or less in duration, but I can control that from full power down to less than 1%. So you can get you can really tune the lighting to, to match the situation. You can also fiddle about with the beam. You can adjust the width of the beam and tilt and pan the head and all sorts. So very versatile in that respect. As I said, you can use them on or off the camera, but there's one great big caveat. If you're going to put a flash gun on top of a camera through the sort of hot shoe attachment, you need to be confident that that flash gun is designed for and compatible with the particular make and model of camera that you're using. You're basically connecting two electronic circuits together, and if they're not compatible, you can damage either the flash gun or the camera or both. So just a sort of caveat there. What's not so good about flash guns? They can be complex to use. Flash photography is a field in its own right, and to use it to its full capacity is quite a technical thing and something that I don't profess to be an expert in. But having said that, we can use them to very good effect in quite simple ways. I think one of the main drawbacks is that you only get to see the result after you've taken the shot. This flash of light they produce is, as I said, a few milliseconds or less in duration. So you've got no chance of doing a sort of preview flash and seeing what the effect is going to be. And that leads to more trial and error, and that can slow the process down. And we're usually up against the clock in doing these surveys. We've got to, people kindly let us into their homes, but they probably don't want us to sort of stay more than a polite amount of time. So it can slow us down, but with practice you can speed it up. And they can be on the pricey side, especially if you go for the manufacturer's own brand ones. You can get sort of third party and second hand ones, but just be aware of that sort of caveat about compatibility. So that's flash guns. The other source of light I use is LED lighting, and not sort of any expensive studio lights or anything like that. Very simple, the sort of thing that you can buy in DIY stores now. LED work lights, and they're very good. They're good things about them. They're cheap and cheerful. Probably looking at something that's sort of 25 or 30 quid there. They give a nice light that's very close to the sort of light that comes in through a window, close to daylight in that respect. And they're simple to use, and you can move them around and see where shadows are going to fall, and just get the result right, and then take the shot rather than. So there's a bit less trial and error with them. What's not so good? They're not very subtle. They do what it says on the tin. They're a work light. They've only got two settings. That tends to be bright and very bright. You can modify it a bit with a bit of creativity. This one I bought here. When I bought it, it came with this sort of polystyrene packing, which I think was only packaging. I think it was only there to protect the lens during transit. But it, whether intentionally or not, it makes quite a handy diffuser if you stick it over the lens. If you've not got one of those, you can clip a bit of paper over there and damp it down a bit. If that doesn't do enough, you can use 2 bits of paper. So there are ways to get some control over them. They can be a bit cumbersome. They're bigger than flash guns, not as maneuverable in small spaces. And this is both a pro and a con. They've got a wide fixed beam. They do what they're designed for. They're work lights, so they tend to give a flood of light, rather than a sort of tunable sort of pointable beam. That can be a good thing if you're looking to light a wide area. It can be a downside if you're looking for something sort of more precise and specific. Sometimes you don't want the light sort of pointed directly at the subject. You want to soften it a bit, and you can use reflectors. And You can buy little things like this quite cheaply. It comes in a little bag there, about the size of a dinner plate, and you take it out of the bag, and it just one of these, bit like one of these pop-up tents. It just springs into shape and makes a quite a handy reflector. Takes you about 20 minutes to get it back in the bag when you're finished with it. But that's another matter. Um, Also useful, another source of light is a little pocket torch. You can get these little LED pocket torches now. They're quite handy. Got a pocket clip on there, so you're less likely to lose them. And again, they're useful for getting some light into little nooks and crannies. So armed with that, we're going to try some of those lights, predominantly here the LED work lights, and see if we can even up this ceiling a bit. So there we are. We've got better even lighting over the ceiling now. What I've got is three of these LED work lights on the floor, sort of pointing upwards. We've still got a little bit of coloration here, and that's very often these rooms have got quite a lot of dark furniture, dark red carpets, and furnishings in them, and they sort of put a bit of a color cast into the light. Not too much we can do about it at the time. We can get rid of it with a bit of work in some post-processing software after we've taken the shot. Again, I would love to sort of, go into some of the stuff you can do with that post-processing software, but there's not sort of time in this session. There's probably another webinar in there somewhere actually. So that's ceilings. Let's look at another feature. Got a lovely timber frame arched doorway here. What I've done here is this is using a flash gun. I've just mounted the flash gun on top of the camera and fired straight at it. And okay, but there's a number of issues with it. We've got this area of glare here. Carpenters, even centuries ago, were very good at fashioning these timber surfaces to be very smooth, and they can be quite reflective. And if you fire a light straight at one, some of it's going to bounce back at you. So you've got some glare there. We've got a bit of an ugly shadow underneath the arch there, and it's not particularly sort of getting in the way of us seeing the arch, but it's just a bit of a distraction. We've got nice rendering of, there's a lovely deep chamfer on this doorway, and it's really brought it well out up at the top there. But equally down on the vertical bits, down on the jambs here, the chamfer is actually down there, but it's completely lost. If you just looked at that bit in isolation, you wouldn't even know that there was a chamfer there. And that's quite important detail that we don't want to lose. So what I've done here, I've done another go at it, and I've taken the flash gun off of the camera and I've moved it down a bit into one side, so it's sort of off to the left here and down a bit, and I've fiddled about with the output power of the flash, and this sort of feature illustrates the main objective we've got in photographing indoors. We're using sort of available light, the daylight coming in through the window as our main source of light, and then we're just using some added light just to bring out some detail, bring out the sort of detail that we're really interested in understanding and studying that feature. So I've moved moved the flashlight down off to the side here, taken it off the camera. I'm triggering it manually, so I've set the camera for quite a long shutter. The shutter is going to be open for about 2 seconds on the camera, so you've got to move fairly quickly. You've got to wait until the camera shutter opens and then trigger the flash manually while the shutter's still open. So it takes a little bit of coordination, but we've got a better result. Basically, we've got that glare has gone, and you can actually see now that the glare has gone. You can see some markings here. The room that this doorway is in had some wall paintings on. You can see some sort of traces of wall painting there. We've got, excuse me a minute, just lost my advance. Oh, sorry. we've got nice detail in the joint, and as carpentry buffs, we're always interested in the sort of detail of how timbers are joined together. We've got rid of that shadow, and it's just isolated that arch from the background now, just brought it to the fore, sort of aesthetically nicer, and just gives us some more clarity there. We've got our chamfers back on the jambs. You can clearly see them now. And I like it's not particularly sort of contributing to the effectiveness of that shot, but we've got a nice soft shadow on the wall behind. You can see the sort of profile of that shadow. So altogether, sort of nicer to look at. We've lost a little bit of definition on the chamfer at the top there, but nothing that's going to bother us too much. So this is sort of before and after the flash mounted on the camera and off to one side. And that's generally the technique. We want to light things from the side to bring out detail. So I looked at fixed lighting, LED lights and flash. Which is best? It depends on the situation. There's a situation, there's a nice beam here, very elaborate moulding on it, and some nice sort of fluting there where it goes into the wall. That fluting, which is an interesting, unusual bit of detail, and it's sort of buried away behind a bit of architrave behind the window. That's shaded quite a lot, and this is just with natural light. This is just with the light entering the room through the window. So I've taken a couple of shots for comparison. This is using an LED light, just pointed at it basically, and so you've got this fairly broad beam, and it's given us some detail. It's given us a much better view of the profile of that, particularly of that fluting. Done the same with the flash gun, and you can see there in this case, the flash has given us, it's more precise. It's given us a bit more detail. We can see, probably clearer the profile of those mouldings. You can see it's more targeted because in here there's, the light is sort of tends to be concentrated up here rather than in the background. So out of those two, I'd probably in that case choose the flash, but it's sort of horses for courses of what works best in any given situation. It occurred to me after doing this stuff for about 10 years, while I was doing that, I didn't actually have a picture of me taking pictures doing this stuff. So that the owner of the house that those beams we just looked at are in kindly took a shot of me, and I thought it'd be useful to include it just to sort of explain the method that I've come to use. So there I am, taking a picture of one of those beam endings. So you can see the camera's on a tripod. I always use a tripod for this indoors for two reasons really. One, keep this camera steady, avoid any camera shake. Also, it leaves my hands free to adjust the position of lighting and mess about with other stuff. So I'm not touching the camera at all. I've got the camera linked wirelessly, and most cameras will do this. Some manufacturers call it tethering, some call it near field communications, but basically you can link the camera wirelessly to a tablet, to an iPad in this case. And here's a screenshot of that iPad, and it's doing a number of things. It's your viewfinder, so you look in there at exactly what you're looking at the view through the camera lens. You've got some controls down here for messing about with exposure and so forth. And you can see that, actually you can see that little white balance control there as well. And you've got the button to press to take the picture. So I found I've sort of come to prefer that as a way of working. There are other ways you can sort of free yourself from the camera, touching the camera. Some cameras you can get a remote control, like a remote control cable that you plug into the camera. You can even get wireless ones. So you've just got this little thing like almost like a little TV remote that you can used to control the camera. Probably the easiest way, and something you can do on any camera, is use the self-timer function, you know, the sort of thing that you do if you're maybe taking a family portrait or something, that you delay the firing of the shutter. So you press the button on the camera and quickly run around and get yourself in the shot and wait for it to take. You can use that, and if you set that to something like 10 seconds, then um, you get rid of any vibration, and any vibration from you pressing the shutter on the camera has died down, and also it gives you time to run around and you know, tweak the position of lights or whatever. So that's another way of working. But I found this way with linking it to an iPad, my sort of preferred way of working. So let's venture upstairs. And if you're going to go upstairs, I guess this is a pretty nice upstairs to go to. This is a lovely um, late 1400s roof, and it's got these superb set of roof trusses open right up to the ridge, wind braces, arch braces, a lot. So really, really nice place. Um, First thing to point out is if you're photographing something like that, camera position is important. And I've here got as low as I can. I've just about opened up a little gap there between these last two trusses, and that's quite important because it sort of separates and puts a bit of separation between them. If I'd been higher with the camera position, then those two last trusses would have merged into one. You wouldn't really sort of see what's going on there. So camera position is important. I'd have liked in this case to get a little bit lower so that we could see the whole apex of this truss, but I'm just about lying on the floor there, so just about as low as you can go. I've got my LED lights, so we've got plenty of light coming in. There's quite a few windows in this room, which let in a lot of light, but I've also got my LED lights on the floor pointing straight upwards, and the telltale sign, you can see the shadows on these pegs there. So I've got lights down here on the floor shining upwards. I put them there for two reasons. If I wanted to add some light, if I'd had them further back in the room, pointing into the room, then uh, sure enough, these timbers, these collars would have cast shadows up here somewhere. So you'd had some sort of shadow going on. The other reason is that it's this technique of oblique lighting brings out a lot of detail. And if you look particularly at this collar here, so I've zoomed in and taken a detailed shot of that collar, and it reveals, you can just about make out there some diagonal saw marks, and on this side they're inclined inwards, and over here they're inclined inwards the other way. That's quite important information for us. That tells us that collar was cut from a log using a sawing technique called trestle sawing, which was in use up until about the mid 1500s, and it very rapidly then gave way, and it produces these opposing diagonal saw marks. After the mid 1500s, it very rapidly gave way to pit sawing, which produces much more perpendicular marks. So if we see those sort of diagonal marks, particularly if they're opposing on either side like that, that's a pretty good indication. It gives us a pretty good rough dating that timber was probably sawn sometime before the mid 1500s. And in fact, we've dendro dated this roof to, I think, sort of late 1400s, about 1470, something like that. So it does bear witness. And it's by careful positioning of the lighting that you can bring out detail like that. Now you've also we're sort of so busy. I think that's such a magnificent roof. While we're busily looking at it, we don't notice there's a window down there, and that window is heavily overexposed and completely blown out. So what if we wanted to take a picture of that? It doesn't matter in this case because the star of the show here is that roof, those roof timbers, and we're almost oblivious to the window. But what if we wanted to take a picture of that window? Windows are probably one of the trickiest things to photograph from inside. You've got strong light entering from inside, entering from outside. So you've got a mix of very dark shadow there and very bright highlights there. You can see the light coming in through the window. It's so bright that it's almost like the light's almost burning out, and that's a bit of glazing bar on the window there. And photography uses the same terminology as sort of music and hi-fi and whatever. We talk about dynamic range. We say the scene's got a high dynamic range, high range between the darkest shadows here and the brightest highlights there. And the problem we've got in photographing something like that is cameras don't have a wide enough dynamic range to cover the whole of the range of tones of light levels in that scene. So we've got the camera in the middle there. We're going to have some shadowy bits here that are underexposed and complete lack of detail. And we're going to have some bright bits here that are overexposed and again, lots of detail there. So if we're going to get a more effective picture of that window, we need to do one of two things. We can either reduce the dynamic range of the scene or increase the dynamic range of the camera. And the good news is we can do both of those. We can do either of those things. So we're going to look at an example of each. And I'm going to look at, first of all, this window, reducing the dynamic range of the scene. So we're going to need to tackle sort of both ends of the dynamic range here. We need to do something about these overblown highlights here. And to do that, what we can't do is reduce the light. That's the daylight outside, that's the sun, so we can't go and turn it down. We could hang around, until it starts to get dark, till the light level drops, but we don't do that. So we need to find a way of dealing with that. What we're going to do is use a feature which is on all cameras and smartphones, a thing called exposure compensation. You usually find that some cameras have got it as a sort of dedicated button there with a little plus minus symbol on it. And when you engage that, it brings up a little scale in your viewfinder, and you can, by turning a dial or whatever, you can either overexpose or underexpose. So you're shifting from the exposure. I'm sort of assuming with this you're using the camera in some sort of automatic mode, so the camera is choosing the right settings to give you a balanced exposure. That's good for most situations. Sometimes you need to override it. So this exposure compensation enables you to override it one way or the other. Smartphones have got exactly the same. This is camera settings on my iPhone, which is by no means a current iPhone. I think it's a iPhone 12, and I think they're up to about 17 now. So antique by technology standards, but it's got the same little thing, this exposure thing, and exactly the same. If you switch that on, then you get this little sliding scale. I think on a lot of phones, actually, it's easy to find. It's there, and I don't know of a phone that hasn't got it. So what we're going to do is actually use that to underexpose the camera. So we're not reducing the light level coming in, but we're now tuning the camera, setting the exposure to deal with these highlights. So we can see we've lost a lot of the intensity. We've got our glazing bar back there. So that's fixed the highlights. We now need to do something about these shadows down here. And to do that, I'm going to do something much simpler. I'm just going to throw some light at them using a couple of these. So I've got one of these. I'm going to place one each side of the window. And here's the result. We've controlled the light coming in through the window, and we've got a nice level of light on the frame. So we can really see the profile of the mouldings on that window frame. Lights are one each side. It helps if you've got somebody holding lights. You need to be, if you're working on your own with this stuff, you need to be a bit of an octopus. But I've probably find somewhere to put the lights there. Important to have the lights, if you're lighting a window from inside, important to do it from the side. If you point a light straight at a window, then the glass is just going to act like a mirror and bounce most of the light back at you. So that sort of fixed that one. Now, this time last week, I was in the lovely city of Bruges in Belgium. I don't know if you've ever been there. It's an absolute architect's delight, wonderful architecture there. And if you're an aficionado of brickwork bonding, it's absolutely paradise. And the beer's pretty good as well. But I found myself in one of the many wonderful cathedrals and churches there, and there's a lovely sort of space at the end of this church where you're surrounded sort of on three sides by this wonderful stained glass. And uh, not surprisingly, I didn't have a couple of LED work lights with me, so I couldn't do the same trick there. You can see we've got the same sort of situation. We've got wide dynamic range there, so we've got everything from overblown highlights in the window here and lack of detail down below here. So even if I had any lights with me, it probably wouldn't be a lot good because it's a big space, so you'd need to throw a lot of light in there to bring up this detail. So what I'm going to do here is the second method of increasing the dynamic range of the camera to match the scene. And that sounds horrendously complicated and expensive to do. It's actually absolutely free, and just about any camera and smartphone will do it, and it's very easy to do. You use a feature called high dynamic range. You usually see it abbreviated to HDR. I mean, for years I saw this HDR thing coming up on the phone and didn't know what it did. But what it does is, without you having to do anything, the camera automatically takes, there's sometimes you find it on this little button. Somebody may have spotted what's happened to the compensation button that was on that camera just now. It's a different camera. But there's a little button there. If there's not a dedicated button, then you'll find it in a menu somewhere. Same with the smartphone, you've got this thing there where you can switch the HDR on or off. I think on a lot of smartphones, HDR is sort of on by default now. But what HDR does, you take the dynamic range of the scene, and without you having to do anything, the camera takes not just one picture, it takes a series of photos at different exposure settings. So it does one here, which is underexposed, so you control the highlights in the window. It's done one sort of in the middle there somewhere. And it does one overexposed, so we brought out the detail in the shadows. And don't ask me how it does it. Somehow in the processing within the camera, the user doesn't have to do anything. It sort of blends those three together and produces a sort of composite image, which tries to take the best of all three. Doesn't quite make it. I would call it increased dynamic range rather than high dynamic range. You see here, we've still got some sort of fairly strong highlights in the window there, but we've got the detail that we didn't even see before down here. So it's it's a good technique if you're in a big space and don't have the opportunity to add some light. You can go further than that, further than this sort of automated function within the camera. You can take your own set of shots at a wider range of exposure and then blend them together in some sort of post-processing software. Same result. Personally, given the preference, I would always go for the first method of introducing some light. I think you're more in control of the light. I can position those lights to bring out the detail. The HDR shots tend to be a little bit flat because you're just using ambient light. And I think with adding some light, you're actually fixing the problem, which I generally prefer to using technology to get around the problem. But it's there in situations where you need it. So what else is there to see on the first floor? if all roofs were like this, wouldn't it be great? But generally, the upper sections of these trusses are above the ceiling level, and about all you can see at first floor are maybe some elbows of trusses, crook legs or whatever. Sometimes they might be painted black, they might be painted white, they might be completely plastered in here. You can see a windbrace there, but you can see this crack in the plaster there, which is the line of a truss. Sometimes they're boxed in, sometimes they're plastered right over. But they're important detail. The way these bits are joined together here is quite important. And that little trick we did with exposure compensation is quite useful in a situation, particularly like with this black one over here. If you just leave the camera to its own devices, it's going to try and average the exposure, and there's a lot of white there. So your black is going to come out sort of pretty much underexposed. You're not going to see the detail here. So I've shifted the exposure of the camera, and you can actually see the pegs in this joint there, which are quite important detail. So that's what you see at first floor level. If you want to see the upper portion of trusses, generally, so that nice roof we looked at is the exception rather than the rule. More often than not, you've got to clamber your way up through a little ceiling hatch, which may be no bigger than a sheet of A3 paper. And when you get up there, you find yourself looking at something like this. Same stuff as there. We've got, rafters and collars here and arch braces, but it's in amongst a clutter of other stuff. There's various timbers that have been added over the years as reinforcement. So a little bit more difficult to unravel, and a bit more of a hostile environment. Lofts are full of this stuff, insulation lagging stuff, and it's here you've got the more modern sort of Rockwell stuff, and here you've got its evil uncle, the old fiberglass stuff. And whilst it's great for keeping the building warm and reducing the carbon emissions, it's for a photographer, it's an irritant, and it's a respiratory hazard, and it's not very kind to photographic equipment. So my setup, my gear takes on a bit of a different look when I get up there. Same setup with the camera on a tripod connected to the iPad, but the camera's in a plastic bag. It's got you can buy from camera shops rain hoods, which is just basically a plastic bag which is open at both ends with a drawstring at one end that you can tighten around the barrel of the lens, not around over the front of the lens, obviously, and then drape it over to protect it from rain. What I've actually done is taken two of those and stuck them together in the middle. So I've now got a bag which has got a drawstring at each end, so I can tighten one around the front of the lens and one around the base of the camera, because I don't want any of that stuff getting in. The camera I use most for this is actually rated as dust and weatherproof to, I think, something like IP53, which is quite a high spec. But call me a wimp, but there's dust and there's the stuff that lives in lofts and the different things. So I tend to err on the side of caution. Same thing with my iPad. I've got that wrapped in cling film, and one of the happy coincidences is that touchscreens work through cling film, so I'm able to wrap that up and keep the dust out of it. Lighting, when I'm up there, I just use the LED lights. To be honest, I've used flash in a loft, but you've got so much else to do up there that, to be honest, if you start messing around with a flash gun, it's just going to take you a lot longer. And a few lofts, it's a little bit like mountaineers call anything over 8,000 meters the death zone, and I tend to treat lofts a little bit like not as dramatic, but there's only a certain amount of time that you can spend up there really before it has an impact on your demeanor. So quicker the better, really, and these work lights are quickest solution. Other stuff when I'm up there, face masks. So I was wearing face masks doing this stuff long before COVID came along. Little vacuum cleaner for two purposes really. The first thing that's going to happen when you open that loft hatch is a load of dust and bits of fiberglass and cobwebs are going to come down, and you want to be able to clear those up and leave somebody's home as you found it. Um, it's also useful for if I want to take a particular interest, say in a timber joint. Very often that timber joint is clogged up and covered in the same sort of dust and cobwebs, and you can just whisk it away with this one and get a much better view. My little torch comes in handy up there again, especially with the pocket clip so you don't lose it. Uh, Little tip I've learned is if you're using a torch up there, leave it on, because even with the pocket clip, sooner or later you're going to put it down or drop it somewhere, and at least if it's switched on, you can see where it is before you come back down. I've also got a sort of hinged, what I use as a crawling board, because these lofts are generally not boarded, which is a good thing because that means they're not full of empty suitcases and boxes of Christmas decorations and whatever. But they're you don't want to go and put your foot through the ceiling, so I use this as a crawling board. It actually started life as I made it as a ramp for when our dog was small, for the dog to get in and out of the car. But the ramp turned out to be almost as heavy as the dog, so found it was easier to lift the dog into the car, and the ramp's become repurposed as a crawling board. So you can see, you get the impression I don't sort of travel lightly when I'm doing this stuff, and I sort of take the view it's better to take and not use than to need and not take. So those of you that see me doing this stuff know I don't travel light. Um, so technique for photographing the loft, pretty much the same stuff. Position of lighting becomes very much more important. Control of shadows. You can see here I've got the light down fairly low, and we've got this these horizontal collars are you know very difficult to photograph without casting a shadow behind. You've got to really think about the position of the light. Here I've just lifted the light up, just lifted up by probably a foot or so, and the shadow's still there, but it's directly behind the collar, so it's not bothering us. And that's quite important. You'd be amazed how a shadow falling on a piece of timber up here can look for all the world like another piece of timber. Can be really deceiving. So you want to get the shadows to fall where they don't matter. General approach working up there, one of the challenges you've got is not getting close enough to stuff to photograph. It's getting far enough away. They're sort of cramped spaces, and you need to go very wide. You need a good wide angle to get the whole of a truss like this in. It's one of the areas where smartphones score actually, because they can go very wide. They can go much wider than most camera lenses, unless you spend an awful lot of money on a wide angle lens. So they score in that respect. They're not so good in another respect, which we'll come on to in a minute. But general approach here, in the interest of quickness, is I'll take a general shot of that truss and make sure I get a good quality high resolution shot. And I can usually afford then to take some crops from that same image and get a nice detailed view of the key features and the sort of features we're interested in. The apex of trusses is always of interest to us. This case is unusual. There's or not that common. There's a sort of joint here halfway up this rafter, and probably because the carpenter that was making that ran out of timber and had to join two bits together. There's a purling trench there. I want to detail of that one, and there's another one down there. And most of those I can get a good enough shot from just cropping from that one image, so it's saving me time. If I couldn't get that detail, I'd need to reposition zoom in or whatever on that feature and take a separate shot. So most of it I can do like that. Some I can't. This little purling trench down here, there's something that looks a bit interesting about that, but you can't really see it from a crop of that. So here I've had to reposition my camera and my lights, get down there and whisk out some dust with my Hoover, and get some light in there. And you can now see it's an interesting joint. It's like a trench, but it's got this sort of locking rib in the middle, which is a little bit unusual, but it's to sort of stop the purlin sliding when it's in that joint. So interesting bit of detail, sort of, characterizing that carpentry. I should have mentioned about the difference between smartphones and digital cameras, and that the gap between the two tends to open up a bit when you get into a roof. It's low light really when you're in that sort of low light environment. Here's a couple of pictures. This is in my own loft upstairs. Nothing particularly historically significant about my loft, but it's convenient to go to demonstrate this. There's a shot with the digital camera. And there's exactly the same shot taken with the smartphone. You can see the smartphone one is a little bit blotchy. It's not necessarily to do with quality of the optics, quality of the lens. It's not to do with megapixels and all that stuff. It's a phenomenon called noise. It's just that it's related to the physical size of the sensor, and smartphones being compact have got a fairly small sensor, that bit of electronics that turns an optical image into a digital file. And because it's physically smaller and the pixels on there are smaller, you get this noise, this blotchiness. So you can see with the digital one, it's a lot clearer. You can see you can even see some wormholes there, woodworm actually, dead woodworm. I've treated it, but you can't see them at all with the smartphone. So yeah, maybe a smartphone is the right thing to use there in that case. So one last shot, because I'm starting to itch a little bit now, time to come down from the roof. Last shot, just to show you the importance of positioning of lighting. There's a shot of a similar sort of thing, a principal rafter and a collar joint there, and you can just about make out some little sort of scissor-shaped mark there. I've got the light here. The light is sort of pointing pretty much straight at the face of the truss here. So this second shot, I've moved the light around to the side. You can see where it is because you can see the shadow from on this peg. The light is right around to the side now. And just look at how that mark has popped out. You can really see what's going on there. And there's another one up there. So a nice pair of carpenter's assembly marks. And they're quite unusual ones, actually. They're quite notable. Those marks are usually more likely to be in the form of some sort of Roman numeral thing. So it's quite an unusual one. But there we are. Time to come down from the loft. So I said I would pop up some references, and I think we're going to put these in the chat. But there's a very good book there. It's published by Historic England called Photographing Historic Buildings. Very good book, full of practical advice and tips and lots of examples. If you want to know more about camera settings and the sort of technical stuff, there's loads and loads of stuff online, crib sheets and little tutorials and that. One of the best ones I find is the Jesuits one that's quite good there. And if you want to try some of this stuff out, there's a site called Camera Sim, and they've got a number of little animations where you can put different settings on, different camera settings, and see the effect, run the animation and see the effect. And they're really quite good fun. So that's about the end of the slideshow. I'm just going to finish with one thing. I've recently acquired a little 360-degree camera, and it's tiny little thing that sort of sits in the palm of your hand. And I've been playing about with it, and I took myself along to the Wyndham Hall the other day and had a go with it there. And great fun. You can take a picture, I'll just plant it in the middle there, and you can take this 360 degree image that you can rotate right around. And you go right around. You can look up at the ceiling. You can tilt downwards and see these lovely seat cushions there. And I think if you zoom in, the quality is not great. You can get ones that give better quality, but they're an eye-watering amount of money. But I just thought it's probably good for those shots that I started off talking about, where you want to get a sort of, general view of the room just for layout and, putting stuff back where it came from and that. So just playing about with that. But I couldn't leave the Wyndham Hall there without saying congratulations to Lizzie and the little Wyndham Hall project team and the fantastic job that they've done in renovating and turning that into the charming little venue it is. So with that, I'll hand back to Lizzie and hope that in return she'll go on easy on me in the question and answers.
You'll be pleased to know that the sun has now managed to adjust its lighting on my face, and I think I've got more shadows now. Well, as always, that was really interesting and so nice to have a lecture that's really quite informative. And I think there will be many people looking on the YouTube channel, because of course it will go onto the YouTube channel and who'll be able to watch in the future, which is a really useful digital resource for us. Thank you, Tony. We do have some interesting questions, and don't forget, if you're watching, do ask some questions, because it makes it more interesting and we will find out a little bit more. We've got a great one here, wanting to know how recording historic buildings has changed over the years, in time, because obviously not that long ago we didn't have digital cameras.
No, no. A lot of if you look back at some of these old reports, some fantastic hand sketches of if you want to get the details of the construction of the truss and that, and some brilliant absolutely brilliant sort of hand sketches, and a lot of people still use them. If you pick up articles in the VAG journal and things like that now, still sort of hand-drawn sketches. I'm not a great drawer, so a bit of a limitation for me there. And the other thing is, the photographs that people like Commander Williams and Ron Gilson used to take with, much more difficult task. You think about, they were using film transparencies, couldn't sort of crop or anything like that, couldn't see they couldn't sort of take a shot and think, oh, that's not very good, I'll take another one. They had to wait till it came back from processing. So in short, I think it's got easier.
Absolutely, it has. Yes, I've been fortunate to have in my photographic collection some lovely images taken by a chap, Chris Dalton, who used to take photographs for what was the Redundant Churches Fund. I think they're now the Churches Conservation Trust, and
Yeah,
he was always used black and white, but he had his own dark room at home,
yeah,
so he was able to then work on the processing in the
yeah,
dark room. So
yeah.
he was able to take lovely images through doorways where you
Mm,
could see the outside just as well as you could see the
yeah.
interior, but that's with careful processing.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
nowadays you do it digitally in this programs like Adobe Lightroom, but they did sort of do a lot of work in the development and the processing to sort of get the right
yeah,
out of the image and clever stuff. Yeah,
yeah. Yes, one of the nice things we've got in the SANHS library is some of the collections. It's Harry Fryer's lovely pictures, and I know you've been copying some of them for us, Tony,
yeah,
showing some of the old areas of Taunton. And there's a way of recording old buildings, the
yeah,
beautiful paintings and drawings that he had done
yeah,
back in, I think, the 19th century. Yeah,
yeah. I've got an ambition to go around and go to some of the places that he drew those and take a photograph and offer one
Have a
up against
before
the
and
other.
after.
Yeah. I think some
How
of
it
them,
looks now.
some of it's long gone, but some of it is
Yeah,
still there, and it'd just be interesting to see.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. That'd
yeah,
be really good.
yeah. But it
Another
was,
science publication.
yeah, it was an interesting point that when I was doing those, photographing those Harry Fryer things, and that stuff that I talked about of color temperature and mixing types of light was very important in copying those actually.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, yes. It's very interesting watching you
Mm.
doing it. Got
Mm.
another question here. How much do flash guns actually cost? Because you were talking about how they could be quite expensive. And
Yeah. They probably if you've got a third party one, I don't know, sort of you can get them for sort of 60 or 70 quid. If you're not going to use it on the camera, if you're just going to hand hold it and fire it by hand while the camera's open, go into a camera shop and look in their sort of junk box because you can very often pick them up for next to nothing there, actually.
really,
Yeah.
mm,
Mm.
yes,
So,
that's
yeah.
interesting. So
Yeah.
you have to be even more of an octopus, like you were saying.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's
Another
it's
one of those.
hand-eye coordination stuff. It sort of sharpens your wits because you got if you've got about 2 seconds to you know press the thing and hit a flash in the right direction, then it's quite a
Absolutely.
challenge. But yeah, if you're going to use it off the camera, one that you can fire manually if you can get one, and they are around quite cheaply.
Fantastic. So another question here, which is quite interesting. It says, how is this kind of photography different from artistic photography?
Cool. Interesting. I think that sort of aesthetic stuff does, if you've got a mind to aesthetics, then it can improve the quality of the photo that you're taking for record purposes. I actually um, did an online course run by the New York Museum of Modern Art way back in lockdown. I thought, well, I've got to do something. They did an online course, and it was all about going right back to people like Steichen and Stieglitz, and they sort of made this proposition that they were very much of you're either a what they called a vernacular photographer, which is sort of basically taking documentary type photographs, or you're an artist and never the twain shall meet. And then somebody else came along and said, no, actually, that sort of artistic stuff can improve the effectiveness of those sort of documentary shots. So yeah,
Yes,
it's not like I think that as an example there, that doorway, and we got that nice soft shadow on the wall behind, and it's it sort of didn't tell you any more about the doorway, but it's just a lot nicer to look at.
yeah. Yes, I have to say, in France, I ended up looking at an old building and I got completely carried away taking artistic shots because it was full of cobwebs and things.
Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely
yeah,
beautiful. It was
yeah,
rubbish for recording the building.
yeah. What you where some of the things that don't sort of fit, you've got to abandon all that stuff about some genres of photography got almost obsessed with blurry backgrounds when I got into digital photography about 10 years ago and started reading magazines, and everyone was how to make a blurry background, and basically by spending lots of money on lenses, and in this sort of stuff you don't want a blurry background. Right, there may be some stuff that's in the background, but it's just as important in context. So some of that stuff you want to park, but a general aesthetic approach I think
Yes, yeah.
helps
You
the
need to know what
effectiveness.
you're looking at,
Yeah,
don't you?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, what is the most modern building you've ever surveyed?
Oh, um, probably not very modern at all, actually. Good question. And the sort of historic buildings we do go up to sort of post-medieval. I've done some um, some outdoor stuff. My daughter used to live in Brighton, and I did some stuff there of quite modern sort of 60s type of stuff. I did again, it was outdoor. I don't know if you've ever been to the Guildhall in London, but there's wonderful sort of contrast. You got the Guildhall architecture, and you turn around through 180 degrees, and there's this big brutalist thing there. And I love the brutalist stuff actually.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that's really great fun to take photographs, especially if you
yeah,
can black and white ones, because they're
yeah,
all
yeah,
about form, aren't they? Really? And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
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 yeah. Oh, brilliant. Yes.
yeah,
Oh, I found, oh, when I was having a little route around on my mobile, I did find the HDR setting. And
yeah,
actually, if you went to the settings button, you can
yeah,
actually turn it on or off,
yeah,
which I
yeah,
thought was quite
yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
was looking for it on my phone to demonstrate this, and it's I couldn't find it, and it's actually on by default.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, yes. Which is a
yeah,
bit annoying, actually. You might
yeah,
not want
yeah. I
it.
don't want
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Ah, so one question here. What is the minimum spec of DSLR camera that you would recommend for a Nikon or a
think,
Canon?
yeah. Main thing that people get hung up about is megapixels and digital. When digital cameras first came on the scene, I think the first one I ever had was like 4 megapixels, and then it went up in degrees. I think um, 10 is okay, 12 is enough. I think the one I use most is 16, and it's as they say on speed limits, 20 is plenty. You can get cameras up to like sort of 50 megapixels now. You really don't need that. Entry level stuff is fine generally. You don't need to go for the top end. I think DSLRs are tending to sort of die out now in favor of what they call mirrorless cameras. And the good thing about mirrorless cameras is they're a lot smaller. You are getting, everything's sort of shrinking, but yeah, so entry level type of stuff. But if you've got,
Uh,
sensors are going to be about sort of, you know, 12 to 16 megapixels. That's going to be
yeah,
clean.
my mobile does 16, and I
Yeah,
think it takes very
yeah.
good photographs
Yeah,
actually.
yeah.
And it's so
In
easy
fact,
to use, isn't it?
yeah, it can go the other
Yeah,
way. If you try to cram more pixels on a sensor that's the same size, then
yeah.
pixels themselves are going to be smaller, and it leaves you prone to that sort of noise that we were looking at in my loft, actually.
Yes. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, more is not always more.
No, no, it isn't. And I think that's why so many of the very early photographs were so good, is because people had to really think about it
Oh,
before they took
absolutely.
the photograph.
Yeah. Yeah,
They
yeah.
weren't going to throw them away. They took a lot of
No,
setting up.
yeah.
Yeah. Yes. In fact, the last question here says, how many photos would you usually take on the same spot? Which is the
Oh,
same idea, isn't it?
yeah, it's the same thing. Quite a lot. I think it's gone down. That number's gone down as I've got more experience. I used to, when I started doing this, so, oh, there's a bit of timber, I'll take a picture of it. And I'm sort of, more focused now on
Yeah.
what I shoot and also, you know, got more used to it and you know,
You know what you're looking
what's
for.
more know what I'm looking for and
Yeah. You know how to do it
going
now.
around to know that's a shot that's going to work. So there's a
Yeah.
bit of an error. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, the short answer is thousands.
I've got the opposite problem because I've been trained on a SLR, not a
Yeah,
digital one, and I find it really hard to make myself take more than about two shots of anything.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You don't
And
want
it's okay, you can throw them away. It's not a
to. Yeah,
problem.
no. It's I've become a lot more disciplined about it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Tony, that was really
Okay.
interesting, and we'll be able to see your talk on YouTube. And of course, if anybody's watching now and they want to watch part one of your talk, they can just go and have a little look on the SANHS YouTube channel and see what they can find. So, thank you so much, Tony. That was really interesting. Okay, so it's a little break now for the webinar team, and our next webinars will be in September. We've got a whole series lined up for you that I know you're going to enjoy, starting with Tom Maybury, who is always good value for money. Actual events, live events in SANHS. The Natural History Committee are beginning quite a big project at the moment where they're going to be looking at wildlife in churches. And this is kicking off in the Wyndham Hall on May the 23rd in the afternoon, 2:30, where Steve Parker, who's also done a webinar, and you can see it on YouTube, he'll be giving a talk telling people all about this new project that will be running over the next 2 years. So that's really exciting to have things going on with the natural history side of SANHS. And also on the 31st of May, they will be joining the Exmoor Society, and who are having a big nature day at Nettlecombe Court. So the full details for that will be on the SANHS website, but at Nettlecombe Court, and I think in the churchyard as well, SANHS will be joining the Exmoor Society, and they will have an exhibition, and there will be some real experts there to talk to you about the finer points of lichen and other lovely little bits of wildlife that people can look at. SANHS Library Book Club, opening up the library, the wonderful SANHS Library to everybody on the 11th of June at 10 o'clock in the morning. The SANHS Library will be bringing some of their books out for you to have a look at, and our librarians and the Heritage Centre librarian, Kate Parr, will be there to talk to you about how to borrow books, which is always a challenge, and also talk about some of the different sorts of collection. I think, again, we will be focusing on the wildlife to support the Natural History Committee. The SANHS AGM, because now that we're a CIO, it's SANHS CIO AGM. That will be on Saturday, the 11th of July, and that will be at the Wyndham Hall, and that will be in the morning. Anything about our events, please go and look on the website. Only one forthcoming Associated Society event. Everybody's shut down for the summer season. South Petherton Local History Group will be having a talk about history of Compton D'Urville, and that will be on the 28th of May, and that will be at 7:30 in the evenings, and that's in South Petherton. Okay, well, that is it for our notices this evening. Thank you all for coming along. Thank you for the webinar team, because we're without Tony today. Harriet has come to join us, so we've had Hattie and Allan, and of course, Nathanael. And thank you all for coming along, and we'll see you at the next webinar, which will be in September. Thank you very much, and goodbye.